What's up, YouTube? This is Daniel from LCOI. This is going to be a tutorial on how to take pieces of Tulip apps and consolidate them into a separate application. For example, when you have many work instruction apps that all have the same defect logging step, we want to pull that out into its own separate application so that you can manage all of the logic and any necessary changes in just one location. So this gets into the programming concept of don't repeat yourself. There are some situations where you might want many applications to have a different defect logging. That's a conversation that's going to depend heavily on what you're trying to do. But in this series, I want to show how I approach abstracting a Tulip step into a separate application so that if you have a large number of work instruction apps, they can all use the same defect logging, event logging, or any other auxiliary step in the required process. I've had multiple requests to do long form unedited tutorials, so I'm going to be walking through this exactly as I'm solving the problem. I obviously have the architecture in my head, but I'm going to go through my entire Tulip app building process and try to do this in one cut so that you guys can see a natural Tulip app building experience, and hopefully I'll be able to throw in some tips and tricks along the way. Let me know if you guys like this kind of comment or like this kind of content. I'll hopefully be doing some more in the future. So to get started, I want to sort of draw what I'm intending to do here. So we have these many applications. Now I've just copied for simplicity's sake, and this is also an extremely simple work instruction setup. In a more realistic scenario, you'd have many other tables and logic to deal with, but this should get the point across about how I take this log defect step and I move it into a separate app. So let's draw it out real quick. What we have is this list of many apps that all have the defect logging step carried inside of them, right? And that means you have to update it in every single app if you ever want to make changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy that app, any one of them, and we're going to remove everything except the defect logging step. And that's just going to be our defect logging app. And what we'll do next is set it up so that from every work instruction app, you can route directly to the defect logging app instead of going to a step in your app. So we'll use the same button. It'll have the same look and feel, except this time we need to be able to get back, right? So in order to get back from this defect logging app, we need our Tulip app before we go from the work instruction app over here to the defect logging app. We're going to write some information to what I call the stations table. And this is a way of storing global information so that the defect logging app can go get the information about which app the user is coming from, or the station is coming from specifically. And then when you're done with the defect logging app, Tulip logic can route you back to the app and to the step from which you came. So that's what we're going to be building. Let's head over. I'm going to open up two apps and walk through this entire process. All right, so I'm going to be using this one. I have two apps. I apologize that they are truly the exact same simple app from the Tulip library, but I think that makes this demo a little bit more educational. So you can see I've have one with a black header and this one with a blue header. So these represent two different apps. They have two different names. And what we're going to do is first create an application that will serve as our defect app. So a really easy way to do this is to go out and duplicate one of our already existing work instruction apps. All right, we can go to that app. And now all we need to do is delete that step group. And we can probably just remove this as well. Looks like there's a bug where we can't delete the last step group, but that's okay. Yeah, that won't be a big deal. And so this will just be our log defects. And let's rename this app, of course, to defect log. So central application for logging defects from assembly and inspection work instructions. All right. And so then if we go to our, let's open this up in a new tab. I always like to have many tabs open if I'm working across different apps. So we have this, we know we'll come back to this. Let's actually change the header color so that we know when we are in a specific app. Maybe we'll do like a nice purple here. That's just for clarity in the tutorial. And then in this type of step, we'll obviously not need any of these base layouts, which had already been removed. We may even want to remove the menu button, but we'll leave it for now. We'll come back to this. So now in our assembly apps, let's open both of these up. We want to route to that step when a user clicks this defects button. So that button is on the base layout, I believe. Okay. And right now, if we go to the base layout and we look at the logic, we can see it's going to route to the log defect step. So basically, all we need to do is remove that. And instead, we are going to app, complete app, then change to step. And now you'll see a long list of all the applications in your instance. This can be quite a long list, but if you scroll through, you're going to find the defect log app. And now I used specifically this complete app, then change to step, because that will allow me to route to the specific step in that app. So this will make it a more natural transition. Okay, so let's save that. And now obviously I would need to do this in all of my apps, but a nice trick to maybe speed things up is I can go to the app where I made the change, and then I can go to the app that doesn't have it yet. And if I delete the old widget and then paste the widget from the other app, we should see the exact same trigger statement is already here. So always good to know when you're working on two apps at the same time that you can copy from one to the other. And now we have the ability to delete this support step group. We're not going to need it anymore because there's going to be a central app. Okay. And all right. So we have our setup now, and let's actually give this a run and see how it goes. Obviously, things are not quite done, but this should start to get the idea across, is that now when I hit defects, it's going to route me to that particular app. Now, the problem is that if I want to hit this X button, it's not bringing me back. That's really the hard part, right? So let's get started setting that all up. The main thing that we're going to need is a stations table. And you can call this whatever you want. Some people might call it like global station information. Some people might do it based on the user. But the idea here is that one station cannot be in use at many times. So if a computer is connected to a station, we know that it's the only computer using that station. And that allows us to get a unique identifier to store stateful information about what app we should go back to. So that'll all make sense over the rest of this video, but let's start from total scratch. I'm going to create a brand new table called maybe station state or global station state. It's up to you guys. Info about a station's current activity. And by creating a few columns and utilizing this table, we can store exactly the information that we need to get back to the app. So the ID will actually be the station ID. So sometimes it's nice to rename this unique identifier column. That'll be the station ID. Then we're going to have the previous app name, and we'll have the previous step name. And I think that's all we'll need, but I'll leave this tab open just in case we need to come back. So what we're going to do now, where this all starts to come together, is we want to connect to that table anytime we open one of these apps. So whether it's the black assembly app or the blue assembly app or even the defect app, we want to always be connected to this station state app. So what we'll do in order to keep that, we'll find that table, global station state, and we'll create a record placeholder for it, current station. And the easiest way to guarantee that someone using a Tulip app will always have access to this table and this record is if you go in the top right and you go over to the app pane, there's a set of triggers that you don't use often, but when you want to guarantee that a trigger is run as soon as someone begins an app, you can go app and then app started, and this is a trigger that will fire whenever someone starts this application. And what we want to do is load the station. So what we're going to do is just use a table record, create or load record. Now this is important because the first time a station runs this app, we want it to create based on their station name. But if it already exists, we want them to load. We don't want to make infinite records here. And the secret is really that we're going to use the app info station name as the unique identifier for that table. So anytime we open up this app, we are going to load or create, if necessary, a record in the station state table based on our station name. Obviously, something to keep in mind here is that if this station name gets changed, then this architecture is going to create a new record. However, you'll see in this example that if you're using a sort of straightforward approach, that is not too much of a concern. It just might lead to some extra rows in your global state table that will effectively just sit there. All right, so let's save that. And now at any point in time, I can access that global station state row for my active station. And now what we're going to do when we edit this defects button, we are going to store information about where we are in that table. So we are going to write the app info app name to that table that we loaded on entry, so we don't need to worry about it, previous app name. We're going to duplicate this for ease, and we can change the app info to also get the step name into the previous step name. And now when we're hitting this defect button, it's going to log the information of where we are currently, and then it's going to bring us over to the central app. So this is all set up, and now we need to go over to the defect log area and load that information in the same way so that we can use this X button to go back. So the same as before, we'll need to create a record placeholder to connect to that global station state. We'll call this the current station. Again, you can only ever be on one app from one station. And really, you can only ever be using a station in one place anywhere in your Tulip instance. So this is guaranteed to be unique to the computer. Then we're going to do that same trigger as before. We're going to load the station when we get in. So table records, create or load record based on app info station name into current station. And now we should be able to do a quick testing of how well we're doing here. So if I go and I bring in a table record, and I'm just putting this nice and ugly on the right side of the screen so that I can debug and confirm that all my assumptions so far are true. So this defect log is now going to display the table information that I've loaded. So let's go back to where I was testing. Let's go to the original application, which was the 32A app, right? And when I begin this, I want to test things out. So I'm actually going to go to the second step. This one is called heat the soldering iron. And now when I hit this defects button, it's going to write all that information to the station state table. And now we can see the name of the previous app and the previous step name. Cool. Now this X button doesn't do anything yet, but it's good to check your assumptions before you move too far along. So that all seems to be working. I haven't made any big mistakes yet, which is cool. And now we want from either this X button or from the report defect button to route the user back to the app that they came from. So we'll see that because this was copied, this current logic doesn't quite make sense. So we can delete what's on the button here and instead replace it with a transition that says app, complete app, then change app by name. So this is the main secret of this setup, is that you stored the name of the previous app in a table, in that station state table. And now I can hit this X button to route myself back based on the table record, current station, previous app name. Okay. So that's all that we'll need to do here. And we'll want to do the same thing on the report defect button. So we'll do that exact same trick, complete app, then change app by name, table record, current station, previous app name. All right. So now we'll see that when I hit this button, because that table had stored the previous step's name, it's now bringing me back to the app that I was in before. Okay. So one final piece here, after I hit this begin, I was not brought to the step that I was working on before. That's really the final piece that brings this all together. So what we're going to do, if we go back to the work instruction app that we got to, where we sort of loaded everything, right? We're going to use this load station trigger as the first step. But then what we want to do also, when the app starts, we want to route to previous step and clear, okay? So when we come back from the defect logging app, we want to utilize the information in that stations page, in that stations table record. And that allows us to determine if we need to go to a specific step. So what we're going to do is say if the current station previous step name is not blank. So this is going to be our indicator of if we need to do something. If it's blank, then we must be coming to this app from the start and everything's all good. We don't need to do anything. But if it's not blank, we want to add a new transition and we want to go to step by name based on the current station previous step name. Following? So this way, we always are going to get routed to the previous step that we were on if we are coming back. So there's a few edge cases where this might be dangerous. So this is, again, just thinking through the logic when you build applications. So now you'll notice that when I restart this app, it's going to instantly load me into the second step. So that's the heat the soldering iron, because that's what was saved in the table. But we only want to do that once. We don't want that same jump to happen every time. So if I restart this app, it's going to do the same thing. We only want that to happen when we're coming back from the defect log the first time. So what we can do to sort of remember that we're not in that state anymore is we want to clear this information once we've successfully come back from the defect logging app. So the final piece of this, and it's a little tricky, is that we want to clear the information in that table. So we want to clear table record, current station, previous step name, and we want to clear the other one, previous app name. However, this is going to screw us on our final transition here because we're trying to use that previous step name. So a little trick that we can do here is store the value into, so we want to store the previous step name into what I might call a temporary variable. So we'll call this temp step to route to. So we have that as a temporary store inside of our app execution, but in the global state, it's going to be removed, right? So that's that next step is we're going to clear the step name, clear the app name, and then route. And if all of this is already blank, we actually don't want to do anything. So that's the only set of logic that we need here. And now, if we run this end to end, let's see how this goes. Let's go to defects. Let's type in a defect. And obviously these screens would be more complex as you built more thorough applications. Material for the underbelly of the board was too small to fit. And now when I report this defect, it's going to bring me back to the assembly app, which is the one that I came from. I can hit begin, and it should have routed me to the next step. So let's check that out. Something appears to have gone wrong there. Maybe. It seems to have cleared. Let's add some messaging, perhaps. So what you can do if you're debugging this type of thing, you can show message and utilize the functionality just to add a quick debugging logic. So let's save this, and now this automatic routing step will print a message that might give us a clue about what happened. So let's actually try moving to the final step of this app. So we're on the verify soldering step. And if I go to the defects page and then exit, I would expect that when I start this assembly app, I'm supposed to be routed based on the global station state to the verify soldering step. So it's going to store the step name into a temp variable. Here's my mistake. So instead of going to step by name, I forgot to switch this final transition to use the temp step to route to. And now, if I piece this all together, it should route us to the verify soldering step. So that is a walkthrough of how I took a common step from many applications. Obviously, there's a little bit of work required to go and perform this on all of your other apps. So again, this is a good reason to start thinking about this early on so that you don't have to go through and manually make this change. However, we have now successfully set up this defect log step to be totally centralized and able to maintain itself, or you're able to maintain it independently by keeping it separate. It can have its own separate versioning, etc. So for example, if you wanted to change some of your defect reasons, or if you wanted to make this material input a drop down, you would only need to change that in one place. So that's the idea with this logic. It's also a really good practice case to understand the different ways that you can use Tulip tables. And I think it's a really critical piece of becoming an expert Tulip developer, is understanding that you don't always have to have all of your Tulip steps inside of every app. You can separate things and create more connected suites of applications. So I hope that was interesting. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you guys have any thoughts on smarter ways to do these types of things. If you have opinions on when it's a good idea to keep things in their own applications, because sometimes you don't want to do this, right? If there are nuances that require differences between different apps, this might not be the best idea. So let me know what you guys think. I'd love to learn more architecture strategies or use cases related to work constructions like this, but giving it a shot. I think this was a really interesting tutorial for something that you might not find on Tulip University because it's a pretty unique situation, but I think it's really helpful. So everyone, thanks for listening. Hope you had a good time, and I'll talk to you guys later.